Perfect. Now we're live. Welcome, Mark Crowley. Whenever people start showing up in the chat, we'll make sure that they welcome you. And thank you for joining me. It's going to be a lovely conversation talking about heart and transformational leadership. This is CDKx, the live stream. And thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I'm actually looking forward to this. So thank you for having me, Carina.
As opposed to the other conversations where you just kind
Most of the conversations I dread. That's right. I don't tell people that, but our little secret.
All right, I won't tell anyone either. I really appreciate you for coming on. And yeah, it's just going to be an easy flow. I've been reading the book ever since you sent it to me, and thank you for signing it. Like I said, I'm a little bit of a cheese ball and like to have, if I am able to have a signature or something like that, I really appreciate that. So that was really sweet of you to go the extra mile to do that.
When I was writing the book, there were many times where it was a struggle and I wasn't even certain that I was going to be able to finish it. And I remember thinking to myself, if I ever do, and somebody asked me to sign it, that'll probably be like the greatest, validation for all the hard work. So it pleased me to do it.
That's amazing that you actually had that thought, and then you planted that seed, and I must have picked up on it somehow. I was just like, is he going to even care? Yeah, I'm going to ask him. That's
Sure.
I love that a lot. Yeah, it's been a really interesting read so far. And I also want to just go right off the bat and saying it's felt very refreshing to hear a white man talk about the heart and leadership and ancient philosophy and questioning the structures of science and teaching the ways that we just kind of always assume are the norm. Not to bring it all the way right there, but it's true. It's so important to hear that, especially from people who you don't necessarily expect, although I try to not hold that many expectations, if I'm being honest. But that's something that has felt very refreshing just from your perspective to hear you share it in the ways that you have so far.
You're an artist, so you'll get this, but I kind of think this is why I'm here, and so don't misunderstand what I'm going to say, but if a woman were to say what I'm talking about, it would be more dismissed than it's been for me, right?
Absolutely.
But when a man, and particularly who spent 25 years in, a pretty aggressive workplace, financial,
especially just in finance in general, just specifically around the money. Not to interject.
No, but that's it, right? So we know what that world is like, and then somebody comes in and says heart, and they immediately go, well, he's either a nut, a spiritualist, a religious transformation, or he doesn't get business or whatever, but we're not going to take him seriously. But there is value in me being the white man that you talked about, right? Mm-hmm. There is, because it's sort of like, well, wait a minute here. Should I pay attention to this? Should I listen to this? So I think there is some power in the fact that I'm,
There absolutely is. Yeah, these things, it's we don't really want them to matter moving forward. We want people to just, take things at face value, and we want it to be a meritocracy in the ways that we kind of pretend it already is. But we know that that's not always true. Or maybe we know that that's not always true. Right. And it opens up doors. I really, really loved the conversation you had with Claude Silver and listening to the two of you, because I really admire her. I mean, it's the first person I've ever seen that any of us have ever seen in a position like chief heart officer for a corporation. And so just listening to the two of you bounce back and forth and mentioning all the things that you just said of oh, you must be a nut or a spiritualist, or you must not understand business. When I heard that, I was like, all three. I'm a nut, a spiritualist, but I do understand business, and I'm talking about heart. And it's on all levels. It's been interesting to read. One of the parts that you mentioned too that I just read yesterday was So someone was talking to you about it, I think in a New York office in like a corporation, and you were talking about heart, and you were vulnerable and sharing like your idea for the book, or that you were writing this book. And he was just kind of like, maybe that'll work in California, but
Right.
New York, it's not going to happen. And I just thought that was really funny, because little does he know, or did he know at the time, that that's not true. Like, people in New York are going to listen to this. Everyone's going to listen to this. We got Robert.
These are our belief systems, and the funny thing was, and he didn't know this, but I grew up in New York. I'm a New Yorker, right? Mm-hmm. So like, really? Go on, mm-hmm. Can't work in New York? And I had managed people all over the country, including in New York. And the people that responded the most to it, ironically, were the people from New York, because it's this, rock and sock'em kind of world that we think that's what it has to be. You have to go home every night and get drunk, and then, get up in the morning and, take another belt and go to work, metaphorically, right? We think that's the way it's supposed to be. But if you remember, when I got done, I said to him, do you have any final piece of advice? And he goes, well, with my team here, they're working really hard and long hours, and they're doing really great. You just really got to love them. And I was like, did you just say that? Like, after scolding
not
me?
The L word.
Same guy said that to me. So, deep down, we all know this. We all know that I'm right. But I'll tell you another interesting story. I don't remember if I told Claude this or not, but so I'm coming out of corporate America, and I decided I'm going to write this book. And it, soup to nuts, took me 2 hours. 2 hours. That would have been nice. 2 years. So 2 years to think it up, lay it out, organize it, do my research, write it, and get it out. Okay. So now I'm like in no man's land, because I'm not in the world that I used to be. So I'm not with my former colleagues, and I've never published anything. So I have no platform. I've got no Twitter, no Facebook, nothing. Right. So this woman who's a speaking agent says, I want you to work with this woman. She's a strategist for people like you. She'll help you kind of figure out your lane. And I thought, okay. And so she goes, she's expensive. She's just going to give you her advice. And I said, well, how expensive? And she said, $10,000. And I said, is it worth it? And she said, yes. So I write the check for $10,000. The woman reads my book. She reads, at that point, I've written a few articles for Fast Company magazine. And that was my imprint, right? So judge me on that. So she comes back, and by the way, it's just us chickens talking here. So I'm going to tell you exactly what she said to me, and I'm not going to clean it up, okay? So she said, all right, I want to have a scheduled call with you. And so we scheduled a call, and she says, okay, Mark, I've read your book and I've read all your work, and I have 2 strategies for you, plan A and plan B. She goes, you're going to hate plan A, but that's the one I really want you to go with. And then plan B is just like, I had to have something. So I go, just give me plan A. And she goes, you're going to fucking fail if you continue to use the expression lead from the heart. I don't ever want to hear you say it again. I don't want you using it in speeches. It shouldn't be on your website. The book is out there. From now on, never use it again. And I said, well, have you cashed that check? I just paid that much money for this kind of insult,
Yeah.
But you know what? I stood outside of myself when I'm having this conversation, and there was like, the devil on one side was, I just got ripped off here because of this. But the other side, which actually had the louder voice, was she's trying to protect me from what I know is coming, which is people are going to think this is so stupid. And they're just going to dismiss it like this, and they're not going to try to understand it. They're not going to try to understand why I would say this. Even people that I used to work with, where I had this reputation of being this great leader, when people heard it, they were like, what happened to him? Like, is something wrong with him now? Like, no one ever looked under the hood to see what I was doing with people. So she was right. I got hired to speak at Amazon with Jeff Bezos in the room. And the day before, they called me up and said, oh, we just decided to change the whole meeting altogether, and we're not going to have any speakers altogether. So this week, I spoke at, I won't say where, but a major company that we're all familiar with in the tech world. And So the person who invited me to speak told me he was the person at Amazon that wanted to bring me in, and that when one of the most senior people saw the title of my book, they said, no way we're bringing that guy in. We need somebody who knows how to drive performance. And of course, everything I know how to do is to drive performance, but it was just that instinctive, we don't want heart schmart. We don't that around here, you know? So 2 years later, he's bringing me back and brought me into his new organization. So he left Amazon, but that's sort of what the woman was trying to tell me. So.
Yeah, that's wild. But, you know, I think either they'll come around or the new model that's going to be designed is going to not operate with that dismissive domination at its core. And either way, I really believe that leading from the heart is, like you wrote, it's the transformational leadership for the 21st century. So we still have some time, right? We're still pretty much beginning in that.
79 years. But I was actually having this conversation with somebody today. I have my own podcast, and I had a guest on there, and he has done all of this work on how social change really happens. So I said to him, I go, look, the reason I'm having you on my podcast is because I want your formula. I don't want to be dead when this happens. You know, I want to be around to see this.
Yeah,
I totally. A big part of my life to this, and I want to see it. And so here's the thing, though, Carina, is that we're at a tipping point, and I'm like the one guy in the world who's like, thank you, COVID, because, right? I mean, you know, like I said, I put a jacket on for this call. I'm like sitting alone, I'm working alone, I'm all alone, you know. But the point is that COVID forced people to work remotely, to be away from people, and it's harming us. You know, we need connection and we need care. We need somebody to think about, like, what's our life beyond work? Because I'm talking to you in your home, you're talking to me in mine, and that's a different dynamic, right? And if you had children or you had a spouse who's also trying to work, all those dynamics, we have to be thoughtful. So COVID has forced managers to say, is this a good time to talk to you? Versus, hey, where are you on this? You know, it's a very different thing. So in many respects, I think that it's opening hearts, if you don't mind the expression.
I love the expression, and I think that it's important. And I'll tell you exactly why in a second. But first, Kenny wants to know where in New York you're from.
I'm from Garden City, Long Island, about 20 miles outside of New York City.
Wonderful. Yes, Kenny is from Harlem, and now he's living in Sugar Land City, Texas, I think, if I remember.
I don't know where that is. Well, tell Ken that I ran the New York City Marathon twice and ran through Harlem both times. So
wonderful. Well, hopefully he's still with us and he heard you say it himself, and if not, I'll make sure that he knows. My mom is from Long Island in Huntington Station.
Oh, yeah, that's real close.
Really? She went to Walt Whitman in high school.
Yeah, they were our competitor. We played Walt Whitman, so
I love that. Who knows? Maybe you and my mom went to the same football game once or something. Maybe. Oh, I love that. But yeah, you know, back to what we were just saying. I love the expression lead from the heart because, well, for one thing, I'm in the part where you're talking about like how language has persisted to use heart expressions, even though we don't necessarily, if we were looking in a lens of just science, which is like what's broadly accepted, we would see that the heart is just the thing that pumps blood. In fact, someone actually commented on this post before. Somebody had commented on this post, like the heart is just the thing that pumps blood. But I think that that's funny in context to what I've been reading, because I know that that's not true. It's totally separate from your work and from this call. It's just like, you know how the internet is. Like anyone can see anything and say anything, which can be cool and also annoying at the same time. But, you know, I just thought that that was funny. And the thing is that that's not true. Like, the more that we are reading this, the more that we are seeing, or the more I'm reading this, rather, the more that I'm seeing the science and the research that is showing that, like, actually the heart as an organ has an intelligence. And I haven't gotten too far to where I could actually say exactly what you probably know, but like, the fact that it has an intelligence beyond just the idea of it pumping blood, that it actually thinks in a way, or that the way that we think can be tied to the organ itself, and that we're sort of debunking all of these myths of, I always like to say I love science, first of all, and I study science as a huge inspiration for my art. But I always like to say that science is like the biggest narrative that we've all bought into, because we just believe what science tells us. But if you look into like quantum physics, you'll realize that like we only know like this much.
Yes.
So much.
I mean, as simple as opening up a heart. So, let's say you've got a person on a cadaver, but forget a cadaver. You need a live body. You open up, see the pump, 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 and you see no evidence of intelligence. Like what, right? So people are like, well, then prove it to me. So science basically said, and this is with respect to just about everything, that if you can't prove it scientifically, it's not true. So when we say somebody, follow your heart or learn it by heart or have a change of heart, these are all expressions that imply that the mind is thinking, right? To have a change of heart means to have a change of mind. And to learn it by heart, like what teacher ever said to you, I have a big test on Monday, so you better learn it by mind. I know it sounds ridiculous, but right. So why did we ever say this, right? Because somehow we knew, somehow we know. And we also, we love to think that we're rational beings, the expression, I think, therefore I am, that's right. That has been refuted by one of the leading scientists at Salk Institute. And the idea is that our intelligence is actually dispersed through our bodies. So it's not just up in here, it's throughout our whole intelligence. But the heart and the mind are actually connected. So when that woman said to me, you're going to effing fail if you continue to use the word lead from the heart, I had to make a choice. Am I going to trust that? Or am I going to, follow what I wrote about? And the reason that I didn't follow what she wanted me to do is because the science is now showing that the heart and the mind are in constant communication, with the heart sending more information to the mind than the other way around. So there's this feeling and thinking thing going on all the time. And we think we're rational beings, and we think all of our decisions are made on rational behavior. I thought this through. But the truth is that we're being influenced by all kinds of feelings and emotions, things that go back to our childhood, right? Our relationship with our parents, how somebody is making me feel in this moment. If you're making me angry or you're not treating me respectfully, and then you ask me for a favor, my choice to do what I'm going to do for you is going to be influenced by that. It's Absolutely. Not going to be independent of it, right? So at the end of the day, the science, and somebody has just written this fantastic book, and I'll tell your audience and you that actually comes out tomorrow, so it's not too much of a sneak preview. But yes, I know, advance warning and advance notice. But there's a doctor, and he just wrote this book. And so the podcast comes out tomorrow. I interviewed him. His name is Dr. Stephen Treziak. And this is called Compassionomics. So here's the coolest thing about this, because caring is the equivalent of compassion. And that's my operant word. When I say lead from the heart, I'm really saying care about the people, love the people, right? But you still have to drive performance and get people to work. It's not like, rubbing people on the tummy all day long. That's not what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. So now there's a hospital in New Jersey, and their patient scores are declining, so people aren't happy going there. And the doctors, a third of the 450 of them have, they're suffering burnout. like they're raising their hand saying, I am burnt out. I can't do this job anymore. So for whatever reason, the guy happens to be very, very smart, the CEO of this healthcare organization. And he brings in his chief scientist, who's also a medical doctor, like the head doctor at this healthcare. And he says to him, he goes, just see if you can find any evidence that shows greater connection with patients has any like validatable impact, right? Can you imagine these two scientists, like, right? So you and I are laughing at this because it's
like what your site says, like, duh.
Obvious, right? So I bring that up with Stephen Trzeciak in the conversation. So he's like, I don't really want to do this. Like, this is a waste of my time. But his CEO is asking him to do it. So he goes off and he reviews like 1,200 research papers and documents. And now he's like totally excited. But what he told me was, he goes, when I started, I'm like, this doesn't have anything to do with healing patients. What heals patients is science. Well, guess what? They found out that first of all, the burnout went away immediately the minute that doctors were compassionate with their patients, intentionally compassionate. Not only that, but people healed faster. And not only did they heal faster, they healed permanently from fatal injuries, fatal diseases like AIDS and cancer, like miracles, right? Somebody simply caring about them. Meanwhile, their costs went down, their income went up, their profitability went up. And then on top of it, the patient said, we trust you, doctors, more when you're compassionate with us. So I call it the wonder drug, right? So, but the idea is, what he said is, we have to stop treating compassion like it's this woo-woo thing and just understand it from a scientific standpoint. And that's really my argument about the heart. Don't get caught up in Valentine's Day, romantic heart, or soft woo-woo. Just get into what is it that human beings need in order to thrive. Because when you put people into an optimal level of performance by making them thrive or supporting their thriving, guess what? That's when they do their best work. Not when they're under threat, not when they're under fear, all the things that we think, micromanagement, all the kinds of things that we think you're gonna, you're not producing, I know how to make you produce. Well, that doesn't work. It certainly doesn't work any longer. But anyway, this was huge validation for me, because now I got a doctor saying exactly what I've been saying for the last 10 years.
I love that. And I think it's just going to become more and more. And I think it will be, I mean, who's to say what, your legacy will be, but I do believe that, like, the fact that you decided to lead from your heart and go with what your heart was telling you, even whenever it seemed like all of these people were coming at you, like telling you to do the opposite, you didn't go with fear. You went with what you knew was right. And in time, I think you're going to be alive to see the ways that it will pay off. And I'm going to
you just hit on something pretty amazing, actually, because I waffled a lot. I mean, it was like there were a lot of times, because it's all uphill, right? When you're trying to change 100-year history and traditions and businesses, we think it has to be like this. It's all the things that we talk about we call people the troops. It's like everything's a battle.
That's a cool. I want to talk. It's not 100 years. It's like we're talking
1,000 years. Right?
Thousands of years.
But in traditional corporate business, we've always managed this way. But you're absolutely right.
Exactly. So, there was an industrial revolution. I get it. I'm just saying it's not a mistake that it evolved the way that it did.
Correct. So anyway, what I wanted to say was that when I'm waffling, when I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, this isn't going to work, people are resisting this too much, and I'm used to being very successful, and this doesn't feel right to me, where I would go is here. Like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Am I supposed to continue doing this? And I next week from
this part of you is like, do I do it? Do I not? Do I do it? Do I not?
Yeah, but this will never give you the right answer when it comes to the most important decisions in your life. It will, but it's going to steer you wrong. It's going to steer you into fear. It's going to steer you into the easy answer. But this is the one that says, hang in there, keep going. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? And that you have to trust that, because this mind's like saying, don't trust that. That's bullshit. This is where you got to go. Quit. Stop doing this and go back to corporate world where you were happy. That's what this will tell you. This will say, you didn't write this book and go to all this trouble to have this end just because you're in fear at this moment, right? So next Tuesday, I have an article coming out in Fast Company that actually explains that intuition is real. And it's not just the quick, familiar intuition that we're all familiar with, but that it actually is a voice, if you will, a small, quiet voice or whatever but I really describe it as a feeling. So if you're making a big decision, let's say, for example, somebody proposes and you're really not sure, and you've been dating for a while, but you're really not sure. The way you would go about this is to do your Ben Franklin, handsome guy, got a lot of money, comes with a great family, great sense of humor. He loves me over here. I'm not sure I'm ready to be married, whatever your list is, right? And then once you've done all that and you've done all your rational thinking, then you go, okay, what is
my heart telling me?
What does my heart tell me? And that answer is the right answer, And if you let your mind override it and you marry the guy, 2 years later, you're like, I should have listened, So everything you just brought up is totally real.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's funny because someone just asked me yesterday, like, are you single? And I was like, I'm married to myself. But I got to tell you, Mark, this next moment, all of those moments back and forth where you were wavering, this next moment's going to make it all the better, because Kenny Dunner Jr. has said that this conversation is so scrumptiously, deliciously, edibly tasty good to him, peeps, and that we have to savor the flavor.
Wow.
Absolutely. So, I mean, right there.
That's funny because I use a lot of food metaphors when I speak. People have told me that over the years. You always use a lot of food metaphors, so I picked up on a little bit of that. That's fun.
I love it. He says he's already connected to you, so that's amazing. I love that.
Oh, that's cool. On Twitter?
Probably on LinkedIn. He is like, people have said this to me multiple times, which makes me believe it's true. And I think it's true, just in my own opinion, that once Kenny has come on your live, you've made it. So we both did it.
There you go.
But yeah, you just touched on so many good things, and I want to think about some of the stuff that came to mind whenever we were talking. Well, first of all, David had said up here, and when you were talking about family, which is the way that you start your book, being very vulnerable and sharing some of your experiences with your father, and how your childhood was less than the Brady Bunch, let's just say. Like he wasn't a very encouraging figure. In fact, he actually went out of his way to be very, very discouraging and domineering. And yes, I don't know the actual science of this, but I do know that everything is a frequency, everything is a wavelength, essentially, and that I don't know about the body parts side of things, but we are very in tune with sound and our environment in general. Like, people say that science is showing that we are a product of our environment in a lot of ways. And you can look at that from any perspective, really, like your work environment or your home, or just the way that, you cultivate the life around you. I especially am a person that's very in tune with the physical. And whenever, and it's kind of funny because I'm like also I am a very spiritual person, and I'll just be like straight up like, yeah. So, you know anything about past life regression or like astral projection? Like, I'm curious about that stuff. Right. But I'm also very much like present with my physical surroundings. I'm not like out there, even though I'm out there, I still am. I think that they work together, and that's something that's going to be revealed more and more, is like the blessings of life. The more present we become in the physical and just like aware of what's happening around us, we aren't able to let or we can choose to not let fear run everything.
Right. And you know, when you walk into a room where there's been a fight,
yes,
it's over, but you can pick it up and you're like, what the hell just went on here, right?
I know exactly what you mean.
Another form of energy. It's an energetic synthesis form of intuition, right? So you pick up on something like that.
Yes.
So when my thesis is feelings and emotions drive human behavior, right? So we're not rational beings. It's how we feel that motivates us to do what we want to do, right? Mm-hmm. If we feel it's not
negotiation is about feelings,
and it's all unconscious, right? So if we're happy, if we work for somebody that makes us feel valued, supported, cared for, and appreciated, we are naturally inclined to reciprocate. But to your point, there's an energy there. Like you can pick up on the energy, and you can also pick up on the sincerity of the energy, which might sound weird, but if somebody is trying to take this idea and use it inauthentically, we have a bullshit detector that's very accurate, and and it actually makes you distrust somebody even more when they try to take this idea and manipulate it. Like, oh, you're a really good worker, Carina. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, something's going wrong here, right? So you're like looking at the person, but there are people that try to do this without having it be inside of you. So you have to really care about people. Start off there, and we need to pull out people who don't care about people from management roles. That's really the crusade on me.
Yeah, that's so true. Are you familiar with how Gloria Steinem defines instinct or intuition? I mean,
no.
She says, this is like my favorite thing ever. She says, if it looks like a pig, it smells like a pig, and it sounds like a pig, but it tells you it's a goat, it's a pig.
Yeah.
And I love that because it's exactly right. It's like, it doesn't matter what the person is telling you. You have to believe your intuition. If it's like, I don't feel right in this situation, then you don't feel right for a reason. And
but that's the mind too. So she's describing it as if I'm telling you that that's a goat, but it could be your mind saying maybe that's a goat. But you're getting this message like, that's a pig. That's a pig, man. Don't, so it works both ways. It's a clever description, but it works from your own voice or somebody else's voice.
Absolutely. And, I think that the next question that David has asked answers so well, because I've learned that, like, in self-compassion, you can figure out you can know just about anything you need to know about others as well. Because he's asked, do you think understanding yourself helps you relate more and be more compassionate toward others? I think absolutely. Because in the scenario where I'm faced with a pig and they're telling me they're a goat, and if I don't know myself enough to be like, okay, I'm a swan, period. Like, I'm a swan. I know that about myself. I love myself despite all of my shortcomings and everything. Then I can engage in a conversation with another person and trust myself in what I'm feeling. But if I don't know myself enough, if I don't love myself enough to embrace my own trust in another, or in my own self, then how am I going to trust another person? No matter what.
There's even more to it than that. So I don't know if you remember, there was this character on Saturday Night Live, Brian Fellows, and he was like an 8th grade, he graduated from 8th grade, and he's working with zoo animals. And so every time they bring an animal on, he's threatened by it because, he's so insecure in himself that every animal threatens him. So he's being critical of all the animals. It's very, very funny, but it's reminiscent of, so first of all, it's a fantastic question. So I have certain mantras. One of them is, you reap what you sow. So that really buttons up my whole thesis. The more, what you give to people comes back to you. So be generous, be caring, be kind, be supportive. But the foundational idea about how you can actually do this requires you to know thyself. And the way you know thyself is you start to get to, like, how did I get raised? What did I learn? What are the lessons that I learned from that experience? In my case, obviously, my mom died when I was very young, and my father raised me with, emotional and psychological abuse, and then kicked me out of the house with nothing. And so that was just one brutal experience after another. And I had to heal that, because if you're carrying that energy, you're carrying all of that, So interestingly, one of the things that I realized after I had my career was that I was very, very successful. I just kept getting promoted every team I ever had, and, awards and all of that. But I was working like, ridiculous number of hours, and, my whole life was devoted to just work. And when I got done, I realized that what I had been doing all along was trying to prove to my father that I wasn't the abject failure. Like, look, I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this. And while it propelled me to do some great work, it's a shitty motivation, right? So the more you understand yourself, when you understand your weaknesses, you can then be better for other people. But I also think what's happening is, in many respects, I think what we ought to be doing is putting people in their 40s and 50s and 60s into leadership roles, because the likelihood that they know themselves is so much greater. Mm-hmm. And they can share wisdom. And the reason that that's important is because I think what people need isn't just a manager to tell them what to do. They need a coach. They need someone, like, look after their emotional needs. Their, how are you feeling? What's going on? How can I help you? And you can't do that when you're 25. You can try, but you're not going to do it very effectively. So the more people have a coach that has life experience, I think people are better off. But the answer to your question is, know thyself. And you have to do the work, because some of that's painful to excavate that. But if you don't, you're just going to run up against Brian Fellows kinds of experiences where you're going to feel threatened by people. You're going to feel insecure in your decisions. It's going to weaken you as a manager. So it's a great question.
Yeah, no, and I really hear you on that answer too, because I just hear you. Okay, that's good. That's good. I use that at some point. Oh man. No, but seriously, because, well, I think that it partly does definitely have to do with age, because you need life experience. But at the same time, there's a lot of
do the work. It's not an age thing specifically.
It's about wisdom, and wisdom can come. I am told often, so I'm going to believe that I am a wise person. And I know that I am in tune with my own enlightenment, which is words of wisdom are whispered to me moment to moment, and it's because I already am understanding of the fact that I have an ego, and that I have a higher self, and that there are voices in my head, and that I'm really the voice that listens. I'm the observer of all of that. And just like a jukebox, I can just choose what song I can skip if I want to, my thoughts, and not let them rule me. And what I really love that you stuck with the word heart and love, that in association to it, is that and compassion. And I'll break it down for all of them why. Like, for specifically love, like, I've learned, and it might have been more recent, but I've really learned it, and I'm sure I'll continue to learn it in other ways throughout my life, that love isn't a polar thing. Like, I used to believe that desire was love, or at the very least, I used to believe that the opposite of fear was love. And that's not true, because real love actually transcends polarity altogether. I break it down really, really simply. Like, desire is being in the classroom. You're being introduced to like everything that could be more for you. Like, if you finish this degree and go to school and get this job, then finally, eventually something was going to be enough for you. It's like institutionalized hedonism in a way. And then fear, on the other hand, is being in detention. Like, you've been shunned away from from this place that you actually don't really want to be in the first place. Like your soul does not want to be in the classroom. It's just the fact that you are not allowed to be in the classroom. You're all upset about it. But love, like real love, is summer vacation. Like, who gives a crap about fear or desire when it's love? Like, who cares about the classroom?
Well, because we get caught up in, there's so many dimensions of it. The love that I'm talking about is really the energy. It's really the feeling. It's the greatest energy on the planet, right? We all know when we feel loved. You know, I'll tell you an example. So years ago, I was asked to start something, to build something from the ground up. And this is like one of these, like, I'm 26 years old and asking me to pioneer something in the bank. And the strategy that they had, they asked me to pilot it. So I piloted it for 90 days. Mm-hmm. And it was working, but it really wasn't working. If that can make any sense, like it wasn't going to make any money, and but it had some potential. So I go in, sit at the board with the president and the chairman of the bank, with all the board of directors. And I said, if you'll let me change the strategy, if you'll let me reverse it the way we're doing this, I think I could actually make something really good here. So I did. And so it became this huge success. And so here I am, this young kid in the organization who, you know, never should have taken this job in the first place, because they said, it doesn't work, we don't know what we're going to do with you. And right. And so now it becomes this huge success. And the company decides that they're going to take 10, 15 people to Switzerland for a recognition. I think there's actually like 30 people and their spouses. So I get this recognition. We go to Switzerland, and you know, we day trips into Germany and having all this wonderful fun. And the last night that we're there, we have a dinner, and it's just in this like lovely room, but not a restaurant or anything, just, you know, quiet for all 30 of us. And the guy who was the head of the bank, who was our host, starts saying, so dinner's over, go bring in dessert. And he said, I just, you know, want to say something to each of you before we go. And so he goes around the room and he starts telling the story about why each person got to be there. And I was like, I'm 27 years old, and I had every bone in my body saying, this is the most thoughtful thing you could ever do. Isn't it enough that you got to go to Switzerland? Don't you already know what you did? But he wanted to punctuate it. So, Carina, here's why you're here. So he comes to me, and I'm last. And by now I'm thinking, you know, people have had wine, everybody's exhausted, you know, and he comes to me and he goes, I want to tell a story about Mark Crowley that I've never told before. We hired him as a management trainee out of college. And we had a whole day of finalists that we were interviewing. And we only had 3 spots. And so Mark was the very last person that we interviewed. And we were like, how do we get out of this? Like, how can we rush this interview? Because we already picked the 3 people. We already know we like 3 people, so we don't need a 4th. So how can we rush this? And they said, no matter how they tried to rush it, the interview was so good that when they got done, they said, we've got to create a 4th position for this guy. And he goes,
I'm feeling good just here.
And then this is what he said. He goes, anybody here think I made the right decision? That's love.
Yeah.
That's love.
That's really love. That's
right.
Like
that's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I didn't know that story. And I'm thinking, my God, I might not have even have been here had he not done that. So you think about the courage that he took to take on another person that wasn't making any money, but the idea that he would want to tell that story to everyone, particularly to me. And it just, I can't even tell you. And I would have gone to the end of the earth for that guy for the rest of my career. In fact, I did. You know, I did. And there's a testimonial from him on my website. His name is Jim Stutz. He's retired now. And he goes, perhaps nobody did more for our organization from an innovative way than Mark Crowley. So he saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself because of how I was raised, but he wanted to make sure that I felt his appreciation in the way he did it. That's really what I'm talking about. He made me feel so great, so validated. And that's what all of us are looking for. That's the point.
Absolutely. I really get it. I really get that. And yes, you know, I took Strengths Quest once, you know, like the Gallup test, and you can figure out like what your strengths are. And I didn't realize this about myself until I took the test, but my number one strength is individualization. And individualization is like what you're talking about right now. Like
everything has to be personalized.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone has to be personalized. We can have this idea like, oh yeah, we'll just treat everyone equally, but like equity is what we really need.
You don't have to treat everybody equally. You have to treat everybody fairly. That's the difference. Treat everybody fairly, and you're good, right? I mean, obviously, you know, and I just saw this validated. You know, I mean, like Tom Brady. Are you going to treat him the same way you treat somebody who just, you know, made the team? Probably not, right? Right. But you're going to give the guy on the bottom a fair shot and support and do all the things that, right? So that's really what we're talking about.
Exactly. And I love like the sports analogy too, because it's like we always hear the words like even playing field. And it's like, it's not an even playing field. Like we can
never been an even playing field. Nothing's an even playing field. Nothing's an even playing field, right? Exactly. From birth, nothing's an even playing field. I agree.
Yeah, and you know, it's not about even necessarily like I don't even think we need to try to make it an even playing field. Like let's just focus on the players. Like let's just make sure every player gets their shot and with what they're working with. If it's Tom Brady, Tom Brady is going to need different training than like I would if I was going out there to start playing.
You know, I mean, it's interesting. I'm a big, don't ask me why, because I didn't go there, but I'm a big Villanova basketball fan. And their coach, they've won 2 national championships in the last 5 years. His record is astonishing. He's just an incredible coach. And so they were on last night. So I ended up watching the second half of the game. And there's just one player after another contributing. Like, you know, off the bench, the guy comes in and makes a three-pointer, or he defends perfectly. And then that guy goes off and another guy comes in and they're all doing it. And I look at that and I think that's the model that we want in business. And what I experienced is that instead of saying, well, I don't know how many kids are on the team. You know, let's say there's 12 kids on a college basketball team, right? So Jay Wright, who's that coach, he's picking the 12 people that he wants, and he's investing himself into all 12 of them. In business, what we do is we look around and we go, these are my stars. And that's where I'm going to spend all my time. Mm-hmm. Because my stars are going to get me where I need to go to, right? And that's just so stupid. So we need a coaching model. We need the coaching mentality. So anyway, by the way, tell Kenneth that I do know who he is from Twitter. So I definitely know who he is.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you just told him yourself. That's awesome. I love that. You know, that's really interesting. You know, in line with your story, Mark, this is why you're here. Okay. I am learning and emerging in understanding that money has a soul to it in a way. And I'm actually reading a book that's called The Soul of Money. And a lot of the stories that I've read in that book have made me think of what I've heard you talk about and what I've heard or what I've read in your book as well, although I just have started reading the book. But I knew I wanted you on here to have a conversation because I recognize about myself ways that it's maybe presumed that I don't understand like innovation or business because I'm an artsy person. But I know myself and know that those are parts of me. And so in line with like the idea of surrounding yourself with people that you look up to and want to become more like in that way and mentorship, I thought of you and specifically wanted to have you on for that reason. Once I heard you talking more and then began looking into like what it was that you were doing. So I do want to like let you know that it wasn't a random thing, me just like being like, oh yeah, this is a person, I'll have him on, or maybe he's got a successful book, I'll have him on. No, like I really resonate with the things that you teach, and I'm really, really honored to have this conversation with you.
Well, it's been fun, that's for sure. So thank you. It's a very different conversation than I have. I mean, we're covering a lot of the same ground. We're just covering it in a very different way. So it's refreshing for me. So thank you, Carina. It's been fun.
Of course. And, I'm learning how to translate. I'm not closed-minded to believing like that I have to stay in the realm of art. I'm actually very interested in business and in leadership in general. And I take on leadership positions in different ways. And like, I want to be able to learn how to translate myself better and communicate better to people who just live in those realms, because once we are able to have these kinds of conversations, we can see we're so much more alike than we are different, just all of us in general. And I really believe that. So being able to have those moments is a really special thing. I want to share one of the stories with you from the other book that I'm reading to see if you've had any experiences like that. And you kind of shared a little bit with the $10,000 check of the woman who like ripped you to shreds, basically. But there's this woman who she runs the Hunger Project, or she ran the Hunger Project. And that was like her mission was to end world hunger and to convey to. It's a huge mission, right? Right. She believes it's possible, and she believed it was possible, and it wasn't just like, oh yeah, we'll make some people less hungry. No, it has to be that we're going to end world hunger altogether, because your passion, your purpose has to be something that like scares you, that makes you think it's almost unattainable. That's when you know it's worth it. And she shared this one story of going to well, first she was talking about like she met Mother Teresa and was like having all these kinds of amazing experiences, traveling the world and really seeing people who were really, really hungry, like begging for food. And she went to Bangladesh and all of these different places. But then she came back to the States, and she had one day where she had to fly from Chicago straight to New York. And in Chicago, she was going to meet with a huge CEO of a food company, and she had to like go up all of these elevators into another building, up elevators into another building, up elevators, and she was like getting nervous. And straight from there, she was going to fly to Harlem actually to ask for donations. So like at the time, it couldn't have been two different environments, or it couldn't have been more different of environments. And she gets to the CEO's office, and he very dismissively just like writes a check for $50,000, which at the time was the most money she had ever been handed by one donor. And she received it, but she felt really bad about it. Like she did not like the way that the energy of that money felt. And then she gets on the flight. She goes to Harlem, and in the same like silk dress she was wearing to meet with the CEO, she's in this basement with a huge rainstorm and leaks everywhere. And she's giving this whole speech, and it finally came time for her to ask for donations. And it was just like crickets and silent. And one woman named Gertrude stood up and told her, I really like everything you just said, and I really like you. And you know what? I've got $50 in my purse from doing a white woman's hair or cleaning her house or whatever it was, and I want to give it to you. And she went on to explain to her that money has a flow to it, that money is actually a lot like water. And she ended the story by just saying, like, she mailed that $50,000 check back to that man because she didn't like the way it felt at the bottom of her purse. But that $50 that Gertrude gave her felt right. So I just thought that was amazing.
Well, I mean, in my language, it's like one came from the heart and the other one didn't, right? So if somebody's trying to buy some peace of mind by saying, here's 50 grand, go solve your problem. Whereas the woman who just cut somebody's hair, and probably needed that $50 was willing to be, giving it to him because she believed in her friend, right? And believed in, there's a big difference, right? And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. You can feel that. And money is an energy, obviously. The word currency means to flow. Currere is the Latin word to flow.
Yeah,
so if you're not generous with it, if you're not willing to give it, you're not going to get it back. That's kind of the way it works.
Yeah, I love that.
Flow.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm opening my mind, and my childhood, I've seen both. I've been like on free and reduced lunch for being under the poverty line, and I've lived in a brick house. And I realize all these cycles of scarcity that like have up until very recently, because I'm ending the cycle, persisted and made me like question my own ability for wealth and prosperity. But I've just recently made this like connection, and I feel like my mind has totally opened up that like my wealth and prosperity is only if I use it the way I am going to use it, will always help me carry out my purpose in life. And in that way, like, it's abundant.
Money carries a worthiness component to it too. What they've been able to show is that many people who won a lot of money in the lottery, they go out and they buy the houses and the cars, and you come back and you see what they're doing 10 years later, and they're broke and they've lost it all.
Yeah.
And you're like, how could you possibly blow $20 million or 20, how could you possibly do that? And it's because unconsciously they don't feel they deserve it. They can't hold it. So, you have to have an abundance mentality that says that I'm worthy of whatever I can attract in my life. And a lot of people don't. So if you're living in a poverty consciousness, you're going to take the job that pays $10 an hour versus the one that pays 20, right? Or more. You're going to look for an apartment, right?
The other one is one that you could get. Like,
you got to start with the belief that you're capable, and why wouldn't you be worthy of it? I think this is Oprah Winfrey's genius. She feels she's worthy of it all. Like, so look at her. She's getting it all. She's got, she's creating success everywhere she goes. And you look at that and you think, well, is she a genius? Like, she's been in movies. She's an actress. She had a television show where she talked to people and opened them up and did some great work. But there's not a lot of genius there. And I don't mean that in a critical way. I mean, it's just like Leonardo da Vinci, or, you know what I mean? It's somebody who's just basically manifesting their greatness. And that's what I think, that's her lesson. Everyone can be an Oprah Winfrey. Maybe not a billionaire, but everybody can be, but you got to believe it.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. And I think too, the one lesson that I've learned on top of the worthiness factor is the gratitude for what already is, because if it's still tied into the scarcity mindset, because there's this belief of like, what I have is still not enough, so I can't do anything with it, because if I do something with it, then it'll be gone, and then I won't have anything when it comes time or whatever.
Well, I'll tell you two quick stories before we go. So there's a guy. He's the president of. I'll just tell you one story. Bernie Madoff. Remember, his story, right? How he created this massive Ponzi scheme and took all their money, and now he's in prison, and his son killed himself, and it turned into a miserable story. But this was a guy who was attracting money from investments and telling people that they were going to get these extravagant returns, and then he paid them out according to what he promised. Meanwhile, going and getting new investors saying, look, this guy's happy because he just got a 35% return, and I'll get that for you, so give me your money. And now it just keeps circulating, and he's taking a piece off and living an extravagant lifestyle and all the jets and all that, right? So you kind of go, well, that's a classic Ponzi scheme, and that's how he decided that he was going to make a living for himself. But the truth is, before he did that, he had a very successful financial business like a business that was making him like $25 million a year. And you'd say, well, then why the hell did you have to go out and ruin all these other people's lives and create this? It was because for some people, it's never enough. It's never, it's a insatiable hole. There's something wrong with them that they feel that they need to do this. And so they do this very corrupt thing. And the guy who was the CEO of McKinsey, you can just imagine how many millions of dollars he was making as the CEO of McKinsey. And he overheard in a business meeting that a company was going to release bad earnings or something. And he called one of his relatives and said, sell all the stock in XYZ company. And they had a trace. And so he, lost everything, basically. He went to prison, lost his reputation. And this was a guy who had it all, but it was never enough. He wanted to get to $1 billion. He was worth like $600 million and he wanted to get to $1 billion. It's like, really? 600 million wasn't enough for you? And so there's some people you could just never, you can never satisfy. So anyway.
It does have to do with like the ego totally running everything, because it will never be enough if that's the mindset. What some wonderful wisdom that you've dropped here. Thank you so much, Barker.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. But it's been great fun. So thank you for doing this, and nice meeting you. It's been really great
Lovely
experience.
meeting you as well.
All right.
Well, that was Mark Crowley. Everyone, I really recommend you get this book. This is Lead from the Heart by Mark C. Crowley. And if you're still watching this, your live streaming experience for tonight is not over. As some of you probably know, the premiere of Discover Your Other Self by Reggie Waterman and DJ D-Money is tonight. So that is starting very soon. Everyone go check that out. It's going to be awesome. And then I'm pretty sure that we actually have another live stream after that, which is KEW with Michael Paterano, Rachel Boris, Jairus Tucker, and Jen Zahari, with a special appearance from Nancy tonight, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you, each of you, for sharing your wisdom with me. I'm just going to make sure I acknowledge some of these last comments here. Yes, one thing Oprah says about overspending is that if you earn $10 an hour and something costs $100, is the item really worth 10 hours of your time? That is definitely a good thing to ask yourself. And once I make 20 million excess dollars, Kenny, I'll make sure I send you a check out in Texas for it. We'll see about how long that might take. I love that your mission is to make everyone smile. You definitely accomplished your goal with me, and I've seen you accomplish that goal with so many others. So thank you for being yourself and for being awesome. I'm so grateful for each of you. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great, great, great rest of your evening or night or morning or whatever time it is wherever you are. It's evening for me. It's actually dinner time, so I'm going to go. Before I go to DYOS premiere for season 3 tonight with Shanae Moret.